You take a great photo with your family or with your friends, and you're like, oh my gosh, if only none of those other people were there. And once they're removed, you're like, great, but the lighting wasn't perfect. I forgot to put on mascara. I had a blemish right there. So I have this photo that I had taken with my family, and I cropped myself out of it, and it looked like this because I was in front of my parents' pool. And my shoulder is sticking up because my arm was around my one child, and then this is not my hair on the other side, it's my daughter's hair. And I really don't need to see this whole yard behind me. I think that it should be nice and clean. So I cleaned up the background a bit, got rid of other people's hair, and fixed my shoulder right here. This is a fairly beginner tutorial. I'm assuming that you've maybe never opened Photoshop before, or you've opened it, maybe played around a little bit. I assure you, you're not going to need to know everything about Photoshop in order to make similar corrections to your own photo. I have my original photo right here. What I've done here so that my windows are all set up in a fairly easy to use sort of way is I went to Window menu, Workspace, Essentials. And then after you do Window Workspace Essentials, then you want to go to Reset Essentials. And if you do the same thing, your windows will look just like mine, and you'll be able to do similar stuff. Linked in photos need to be square. And in order to get a photo to be square, your best bet is to use the crop tool. So you can simply hit the letter C for crop, or you can come over on the side here and locate the crop. And if for whatever reason, something like this happens where the image just shifts completely and you're like, oh, shoot, what you can do is hold the Command or Control key and press 0, and it'll just recenter your whole photo, which is kind of nice. All right, so in the crop area, see how it says ratio up at the top here? That needs to have some information added to it. So over on the right of that, I'm going to put 1 and then 1. And that's going to allow me to have a square crop. Okay. And we don't want this to be too small. You can set it to be like a specific preset, but we're just going to do it this way. And then we'll double check the size using our image size. So here we go. Just going to make that smaller. And then I'm going to move the photo inside of the crop until I get it the right size. And I think that's fine. I'm going to hit return or enter to lock it in. And now I have my square crop. Okay, so over on the right-hand side, you'll see this layers panel. And the layers panel shows you what we just cropped down. Now, if we needed to change the crop again, we can click on the crop tool again. Oh no, I see that I have made a mistake. And the mistake that I made was that I had this button turned on. And this button means that it's going to delete any pixels that are outside of my crop. So if I change my mind later, those pixels are gone. Sorry. So not to worry, you can always do edit, undo. And if you've done too much, you can go to the history window. So just go to the window menu, go down to history, and you will see that we have this list of things that you've done. The most recent thing you did is down at the bottom. So I'm just going to go back up, and I'm going to fix my crop again, keeping this turned off. I want the crop to like remember my old stuff. So I'm just going to make that crop happen. So give myself a little extra headroom and a little extra space if I need it. Good. Hit enter or return. And now if I go back to the crop tool and I click, see how all those pixels are still there? So it still gives me those options, which is kind of nice. All right, so I'm just going to hit the no smoking sign up at the top. Every time you're working with a tool, all the options for the tool are going to show up right up at the top here. So I just said no smoking, which means that we are going to have like, you know, nothing done to it because I pressed that button. Let's go to the image menu. And this is just for observation purposes. We are not going to touch anything here. Just go to image menu, image size, and just double check that your width by height is a square. And if it's not a square, don't change it here, please. That's a bad idea. It will distort your image, but it at least tells you what size it is. Alternatively, you can go to canvas size, and canvas size tells you the size of your image. And if your image is the wrong size and you change it here, it's not going to distort your image. What it's going to do instead is it's going to crop it just enough so it fits in that size. So I'm going to just change this so that instead of 922 by 923, it's 922 by 922. For some reason, the crop tool was off by a little bit. No big deal. Hit OK. Yes, I know it will clip. Okay. All right, so the next thing I'd like to do is select just me out of this photo. And your best bet for selecting just the subject is something called the Object Selection tool, which is over here in the toolbox, okay? Now, if your toolbox is appearing two up, just click this little fast forward looking button or rewind looking button, and it'll go back to being flat. So I'm just going to choose the Object Selection tool. I'm going to hover on top of the subject, which is me, and I can choose it that way. And if I click on that, it's going to select what it thinks is the subject. Now, the problem with this is that if we proceed as we are, we're going to mess up our one and only layer, and that's not a good idea. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this layer so that we always have a backup. So to duplicate a layer, you can right-click on it and you can choose Duplicate Layer. The duplicate layer, I'm just going to call it OG. That's our original. I'm going to drag that below just by dragging it down. Turn off the visibility. Okay. And I'm going to make a brand new layer that is going to be whatever I want my background color to be for my photo. All right. So to make a new layer, you can go back to that same sandwich menu or flyout menu and choose New Layer. And I'm going to call this pink. Now, I like using this option for making new layers. There's other options as well, but the nice thing about this is that it forces you to label your layer before you can do anything else about it. So now I have my pink layer, and let's find a nice pink to use there in a moment. I have this selected area. I haven't done anything with it. So here's my original photo. I have to make sure that's selected, have my selected area. And what I'm going to do is down at the bottom of the layers panel, there's this thing. It looks like a little rectangle with a circle in the middle of it, okay? And I'm going to click on that. That is our layer mask. And now on the pink layer, I can choose my color. And then I'll explain what that layer mask does. So I double click this top chip here, and it brings up what's called a color picker. And I can choose my color. So if your color picker looks different from mine, make sure that you have this B selected. And then you can choose what color you want everything to be based off of over here. You can pull it down to make it lighter. You want it to be kind of sort of salmon-ish pink. You can make it brighter over here. You can add more white to it here. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I'm going to hit OK. But just choosing the color doesn't fill that area with the color. So making sure that nothing is selected. So if you go to Select menu and you see that Deselect is grayed out, that means nothing's selected. Then you can go to Select All. And I'm doing that on this pink layer. All right. So Select All. And then I go to Edit menu, Fill. So it's asking me here, it says, do you want to fill it with white? No, I picked out this really cool color over here. So if I say Contents, Foreground Color, and then make sure that this is set to Blending Mode Normal, Opacity 100, it will fill it in with that color, okay? And I can deselect now. Now, supposing you aren't a huge fan of this color, you can always adjust that color later on just by double clicking that color chip again, adjusting the color. And if nothing's selected, see, there's deselect is grayed out. I can just go to Edit, Fill, Foreground Color. Okay, I think that looks better. Bucket tool is not my favorite when it comes to making artwork, but when it comes to filling in a color just as taking over the entire frame, Yes, the bucket tool is fine. So if you go here on the left-hand side, there's a gradient. That's the tool that's visible by default. But if you click and hold that tool, matter of fact, if you click and hold any tool that has one of those little triangles in the lower right, you will see other tools sometimes. And in this case, we also have the paint bucket. And then you can just double click this color chip, choose a different color. Maybe I'll make it even lighter. And then you can just click here and it'll lighten it up. Now, if you hold the Option or Alt key and you click on the layer mask, you can see a black and white representation of what it is that is and isn't selected. Anything that's white is shown, anything that's black is hidden, anything that's gray is kind of shown. So you can see that some of the hair is showing up there. Some of it is kind of spider webbing a little bit, which doesn't look great. There are ways of fixing that. But while you can paint directly into this without looking at the overall picture, what works a little bit better is if you are looking at the overall picture, but painting on the layer mask. So I'll just demo that for you really quick. If I click on the layer mask, see how this little outline shows up around it? And then I can come over here and make sure that I'm using a white paint. Come over here to the paint brush, and I'm going to click this little down arrow, and I can change the hardness of my brush here. So I'm going to choose like a 90% hardness brush. So it'll just have a little bit of softness around the edge of it. And then I'm going to come over here, and if the paintbrush is too big or too small, I can adjust the size. So if you look at your keyboard, to the right side of letter P, we have those little square brackets. And the bracket on the left is going to make my paintbrush get smaller, paintbrush smaller with that left bracket, paintbrush larger with the right bracket. Okay, so here, if I have that layer mask selected, I have the white paint, and I have the paintbrush, I can come in here and just paint that back in. Now, if I want to get rid of part of this, I can just swap these foreground and background colors. And I can click this little swap button to switch that. So a couple of keyboard shortcuts that will help you here. D is for the default white on black. X allows you to swap foreground and background colors. And then I can come back here and I can actually remove this part of my shoulder, which is sticking up and looked kind of weird. Now, if you want finer control, because I kind of draw like a monkey with her feet when I'm using my mouse, you might want to consider using some of the selection tools. And one of the selection tools that I like to use a lot when I'm doing photo touch-ups is the lasso tool. So if you hit letter L for lasso, it'll take you to the general tool where the lasso tool lives. If you click and hold that one, you'll see our basic lasso, which looks very much like your cowboy lasso sort of thing. And the lasso tool is very, very straightforward to use. You're simply going to draw with it to select the area you want to keep or get rid of, and then come back around to the beginning and release your mouse. So you click drag to make that shape around. Okay, I didn't like how that turned out, so I'm going to try again. And then pull that around and back, making sure that the layer here is selected, and I can use the paint bucket tool and just click in there, and it should get rid of it, which it didn't. And the reason it didn't is because when you have a selection tool and you use the paint bucket, it's still going based on the pixel colors. So in a situation like this, you can just go to that edit menu, fill, and choose that foreground color, and it'll clean it up for you. Now, if you're wondering how I got into that layer mask, it was option click. So option click will get you into the layer mask. Shift click will temporarily disable the layer mask. See how it gives you that red X? Okay, so to deselect again, I'm gonna go up here. All right, that's a little bit better. And we can use this lasso tool edit fill trick on anything where the hair is getting kind of spider webby, or we want to clean up certain areas. So I could just do something like this to select that area. I can hold the shift key to add more to the selection, like so. And now both of these areas are selected. Holding shift, it gives you like a tiny plus sign next to the lasso, so you can add more stuff. Okay, so now that's all been selected, and I can do edit fill. There we go. And then deselect. All right. Now, some of these edges are getting really sharp, right? So in order to soften those out, we would select that layer mask. And there's this thing called the blur tool. And you guessed it, it blurs stuff. So you come over here, make sure your brush size is big enough. And once again, using those brackets from the keyboard, just going to increase the size of the blur and just going to soften that edge a little bit so it's not as harsh. So I'm going to duplicate my layer, but only the parts of my face where it's like not as smooth as I'd like it to be. All right. So let's duplicate this layer. This is my original layer. I'm going to grab that up, just duplicate it. So easy way to duplicate, again, click that little hamburger flyout, or you can drag it down to the new layer icon, which is that plus inside of a box, and then drag that all the way up. And I'm going to call this smooth. Okay. So on the smooth layer, I'm going to apply a blur, and you'll find all of your filters in the filter menu. Now, if a filter has been applied once upon a time, you will find those listed up at the top. The problem with that is it comes with whatever settings were used last time. So I generally avoid doing that unless I loved those settings. So I'm going to go to blur. I'm going to go to Gaussian blur, and I'm just going to soften up my skin in certain areas. And I want to soften up my forehead. I want to soften up some of the lines around my eyes, maybe about like a 3 pixel radius blur. Okay. Yeah. Doesn't that look great? Thanks for coming to my tutorial. This is it. No, I'm kidding. So we're going to fix this up. We're going to just use this blurry part for those problem areas. So I'm going to create a reverse layer mask. So if we made a regular layer mask by clicking on the layer mask button with stuff selected, if we just click on it by itself, it creates a white layer mask, which means everything's visible. But if I hold the Option key down and I click on that layer mask, it creates a black layer mask, which means that nothing of my smooth layer is visible. Now I can hit D for my default colors. I can hit B for my brush. I can make sure my brush is pretty darn soft, like around a 10% hardness. And I'm going to make it nice and big. And I'm just going to paint in some Botox right here. Just painting that in. See? Okay. And then I can make that a little smaller. Now, if you have a Wacom tablet or similar, you can use the pressure sensitivity to adjust the size. Now, this is extreme, folks. I'm going to adjust it further, so don't worry. I'm not going to be completely lying to my colleagues about how young I am on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. So just softening up some of these things. My chin was doing something interesting that day. You definitely don't want to mess with the corners of your nose, the smoothness of your teeth, the corners of your mouth. I have a line. That's my line. Don't mess with those things. I'm going to smooth out my neck right here. Okay. And for those of you who are like, but the texture, don't worry, I'll fix the texture. All right. So now that's all been smoothed out, but we're not done yet. So what we're going to do is take this entire layer and reduce its opacity, so it's not as extreme of a smoothing job. So then I can go to opacity and just reduce that opacity a little bit, and it kind of blends in with my existing skin a bit. Now I'm noticing that there is texture in the whole rest of the image except for where I blurred it, and I'm going to take care of that next. So an easy way to add texture to the entire image would be to make a blank layer on top of all of it. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to choose like 50% gray and fill it in with that. So if I go to the edit menu and fill, I can go to contents 50% gray. Okay. Oh, so good, right? Okay. Then I'm going to go to filter. And where would noise be? Well, there is a noise section here. But if it should happen that you want a particular filter, you don't remember where it might be. If you're on a Mac, sorry, PC friends, if you're on a Mac, you can go to the help menu. And in this search area, just type in noise or whatever it is that you're looking for. And then you can come over here and just click on that. And it will give you this noise window. And here I can add the amount of noise that I want. Now it's hard to tell what this is doing to my overall image. We're gonna first, before we do that noise, so I hit cancel, we're gonna go over to where it says normal, and we're gonna change our blending mode. We're gonna change the blending mode to overlay. Now overlay means that if it's gray, it's as if nothing's happening. So overlay, gray, okay. So that did nothing. But if I zoom in a little bit, so now you can see down at the bottom, it says I'm at 100%. You can also see up at the top that I'm at 100%. I'm going to go to filter, noise, add noise. And now I can see whether that noise is a believable amount of noise. And it kind of is. That's pretty good. So I could really crank it up, but that looks dumb. So let's just drop that down. Around like 3.5, I think looked good for this particular image. It all depends though on how sharp your picture is. So that's pretty good. I'm going to hit OK. And now you can do a little bit of before after. So if you want to see what you did before, go down to that original image layer and option click the eyeball. It'll show you the original. Option click again, and it'll show you what you did. And I'm noticing here that a little piece of the flower of the shirt is missing. So I'm going to go back over here to my layer mask and with the white paintbrush. So white paint, paintbrush tool, I'm just going to paint that over to bring it back. Now, this is not my hair. This is hair from somebody else, and that's not ideal. So we probably want to fill in this hair with my own. And an easy way to do that, of course, is to use the clone stamp tool. I'm going to make a brand new layer, hit letter S for the clone stamp tool, and then I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger, which I can do with my brackets located to the right-hand side of letter P. And I'm going to use this hair right here. And don't worry about this outer contour because that's going to get fixed in a minute. So I'm going to option click up here, and I need to make sure that up at the top, it doesn't say current layer because that's not useful. We want it to be set to current and below, and that means it's going to use anything that is on this current layer or below in order to create that extra hair. So I'm going to option click here and then come over here and start painting. And that looks a little bit more like my own hair. And then I can use a layer mask to cut that out based on what I had on the original photo. So if I take this layer mask and I hold the option key and drag it up, it's going to cut that out. Not thrilled with how that looks. So let's do a little extra something here. What I'm going to do is put both of these guys into a group, click, shift click on both layers, Command G to put them in a group. And then I'm going to take this layer mask and put it on the group level. And this way, anything that's below is going to be affected by this layer mask, which is kind of nice. And over here on the layer mask section, I'm going to use my brush tool and set it to black. Black shows up on top, and then I can just gently paint that little bit out. And because this is a LinkedIn photo, it's not going to be huge. It's going to be pretty small. Most people evidently are using LinkedIn on their phones, so that's fine. Now, there is some interesting stuff happening here. Interesting, not in a good way. If I hold the option key and I click, I can see this section right here is starting to look kind of stringy, kind of cobwebby. So if I flop my black and white and hit B for brush again, I can paint in this little area here. And then I can actually enhance the brightness and contrast of this using the dodge and burn tool. So if I click and hold the dodge and burn tool, it looks like a lollipop. I'm going to choose the dodge tool because I want it to brighten. So anytime you want things to kind of brighten, it's a good idea to use that dodge tool. Back in the days when we used darkroom photography, we would take a pencil and we would put a little disc of cardboard onto that pencil, and we would sort of paint with light to avoid the enlarger light hitting the paper, which meant that it just stayed white. And so that dodge tool is what you would do to make certain areas a little bit brighter. So if I hold Option and I click the layer mask, I can see that that worked pretty well down here, but it didn't work as well up here. So it is very possible to merge different layer masks together in order to make something like this. So what I would do in that case is I would make a brand new layer, Option click here on the layer mask, Command A, Command C to copy. And then on this separate layer, which I'm just going to call mask, I'm going to edit, paste, special, paste in place. And that just puts my layer mask onto its own layer. Okay. And then I can mess with it further. So I liked what this looked like, but I didn't like what that looked like. So I'm going to just paint that away, just to kind of get rid of it a little bit. And then other areas that I'm not as happy with, I'm just going to paint those away as well. So starting to look like I had spider webs in my hair, which isn't a good look for anybody. And then just kind of come over here and paint that as well. Okay, cool. There we go. So that's something. I should probably just turn this off for a moment. See, there's a hole in the mask. We can fix that here as well. X to flop my black and my white, and then just click this a couple of times until it fills in. And then I'm going to paint this as well. Okay, so the mask is getting better, but it's also getting more solid, which isn't usually a great look for hair unless you want people to look like they have plastic hair, which most people don't. So what's the trick? Now, I got to confess, I didn't come up with this trick myself. I got it from my dad. I taught my dad how to use Photoshop when he was in his 60s because my mom was also in her 60s and she wanted to look like she was in her 50s in all of her photos. So my dad, as an act of love, learned how to use Photoshop to enhance her photos, which I thought was really sweet. And he got really good at painting hair, and he would do that using his Wacom pen and tablet. Now, if you don't have a Wacom pen and tablet, not to worry. What you can do is locate a section of hair that you like and then just kind of paste it on top. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to turn off this. I'm going to shift click to disable this temporarily. And I'm going to come over here and see if there's like a little section of hair that I kind of like the way that it looks. And I do. So right here, I'm going to just select this little section with my lasso tool. Okay. And maybe I don't need all of this. All right. So now I have this whole section of hair. And then I'm going to do layer menu, new, layer via copy. Okay, so now I have that as a separate layer. I'm going to move that up here, and you can see that that lines up with that piece. Fine. And we're going to just move some of that over to other areas that we feel like could use that love. Right click the name and go to convert to smart object. And now that it's a smart object, hair bit, we can move it around, duplicate it, change its size without it causing all kinds of problems later on. So if I do Command T, I can just sort of rotate this a little bit, come up over here and adjust the sizing. If I hold the Command key down, I can change the size of this hair a little bit. It's okay if it gets a tiny bit bigger, but you don't want it to get a tremendous amount bigger. Okay, so that's my hair bit going right there. And then maybe I want a little bit on this side. So I'm just going to duplicate that layer and I'm going to move it to this side edit, transform, flip horizontal, and then come over here, Command T, rotate that into place. And so I know it's the wrong color, but I'm going to fix that in a minute. So the easy way to fix something like this would be to change it to black and white. The easiest way for me to change something into black and white is to apply either a hue and saturation or a black and white filter. Let's do the black and white filter. If I go to Image, Adjustments, Black and White, okay, then that changed this bit to black and white. I can increase and decrease these different sliders until I get a contrast range that I'm happy with. Now, there are a lot of other sliders that you can use, but I find that the black and white one is pretty nice. And because this was a smart object, it gave us a smart filter, which allows us the ability to turn this on and off. Now, how do we combine this? Well, we also want to turn this into an inverted image. So if I go back to my image menu, I go back to adjustments and I go to invert, it's going to flop my black and my white. And then to merge this with the rest of the stuff below it, I need to change the blending mode. So there's a blending mode that knocks out all of your black, and that's called screen. So if I turn it to screen, look at that. Now I have this little bit of hair sticking out on the side, and it is somewhat believable. And I can even move this a little bit more so that it feels a little bit more realistic there. I'm going to do the same effects to this chunk right here. So I'm going to grab up my invert, hold the Option key and drag it down. Now I have black and white and invert there. And then once again, I have to change my blending mode to screen on this other layer. Okay, but then how do you connect all of these pieces? Well, what I like to do is I select all the pieces. I do Command G, it makes a group. This is called my mask group. And then I duplicate the group by right-clicking and choosing duplicate group, or I can drag and drop it to the new group icon and then right-click and choose merge group. Okay, so now I have that mask group copy. Command A to select it all, Command C to copy it, Option click to get inside this one. Let's turn off this eyeball, Option click, and then I can do edit, paste special, paste in place, and it just replaces out the old layer mask for the new one. And that is kind of looking okay, except look at what's going on here with the hair and what's going on here with the hair. And the reason why it's doing that is because it is pulling information from this original layer here. See that? That's where that hair is coming from. So how do we fix it? It's not too hard. Here's what I do. I go to my group that has all the stuff. I make a new layer. I hit B for brush. I'm going to eyedropper a color from right here. And then I'm going to, something kind of darkish would be nice. If it will, yeah, that's good. And then B for brush, and then I can paint on a brand new layer. Ooh, I did not want that. Not that, just that little piece. And then here. And it's looking kind of flat, which isn't great, but that's where these blending modes kind of come in. And then on top of that, you just do a little bit of eraser tool, making sure that eraser is nice and soft. And then you can just kind of carve out some of what you did. So it's only going to have some of the hair in there. And then, of course, going back into the layer mask is not unheard of as well, to just fix up some of these little pieces. So L for the lasso tool, let's deselect here, and then I can use the regular lasso, just kind of clean it up. Now, I tend to obsess over hair, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to do anything further here. Some really simple things you can do with hair is like if the hair is not coming out dark enough, you can duplicate this layer a couple of times and, you know, that sort of thing to just make it a little bit darker. You can mess with that matte a little bit more, but that can kind of help make that feel a little bit more flowy. Of course, if you do have a Wacom pen and tablet, you can draw those strokes pretty nicely, and that works pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to clean up the skin tone a little bit because right now it's a bit bumpy. So I'm going to go in here, zoom in, and identify some areas that could be smoothed out. Okay, and there is this really great tool that works pretty well. It's called the Spot Healing Brush Tool. And the Spot Healing Brush Tool, you increase the size of it, you come over here, and just on the original, you can just, on the original layer that's down below, I can just click and drag, and it's supposed to clean it up, but it doesn't clean it up well for stuff that's really a big area. It cleans it up better for stuff that's a smaller area. So you got to reduce your brush size and kind of pick and choose what it is that you're going to be fixing, and set your hardness to be somewhat soft. Like you don't want it to be too hard of a brush. So right here, if I just paint that out, it's starting to do a better job. So just have your fingers like ready on the undo so that you can make those changes. Alternatively, you can make a copy of this and then just make your changes on that copy. So just doing these little types of things. Not huge areas because it doesn't do well with those huge areas. Eyelashes. Eyelashes are pretty easy once you know how to install them. So if you just look up eyelash, free eyelash brushes, Photoshop. Eyelash brushes for free. You can download it and download it again. Wait a couple seconds for it, and then you can actually just like stamp that eyelash onto your photo, which is kind of fun. To install the brushes, just click the down arrow, click the sprocket, choose import brushes, locate your new brush here. There's my eyelash brushes. And this one's kind of interesting because you want to line it up to the eye, and see, this is obviously a right eye. You want to line it up to the eye, you want to make sure it's the right color, etc., etc. So I'm going to make a brand new layer from eyelashes. Call it eyelashes, eyelash right, my right, the person's right, kind of the same thing. I'm going to make it black, click, and I just click once, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to choose convert to smart object. So this way I can change the size of it as I need. And then I'm going to do the left eyelash on a different layer. Okay, and this one, clicking here, boom, now it's nice and dark. This guy, it's probably too light too. I'm just going to click again in here, save, close. And so I'm going to look ridiculous. I can't even wait. I'm going to right click and convert it to a smart object, edit, transform, flip horizontal, move that down, Command T, change the size of it, zoom it in, rotate, and if I hold the Command key down, I can change that, make it kind of distorted. I'm going to do the same on this size. It looks like I have a giant black butterfly. So there we go. And then once again, Command drag. I think on a PC it would be Control. So here we go. Pull this guy down a little bit. Okay, so those are huge and dark. So I can select both of those. I can reduce their opacity a bunch. And then if I want to, I could even give them a little layer mask on each. And then with my brush not set to an eyelash brush, I could just use a nice, soft, smallish brush to just erase some of this. This is eyelash left, X to flip the colors, and then I can just make that a little more subtle here. I think that's starting to look better. This is what it looked like without eyelashes. This is what it looked like with. Just gave it a little spicing up. All right, finally, I'm going to apply some digital makeup. So let's do the lipstick first. I'm gonna make a hue and saturation layer. And on that hue and saturation layer, I'm going to just use my lasso tool to draw my lips, holding the shift key to get the other one. Okay, and then selecting the inverse of that, and then filling that with black. So edit, fill, hitting black and okay, and there we go. And then I'm going to increase the saturation a little bit, decrease the lightness if I want darker lipstick, adjust the hue. If I want it to be more toward purple, that looks terrible. Let's make it a little bit more toward brown. And then if you aren't happy with the way that the layer mask is looking, you can always go into the layer mask properties and adjust the feathering a little bit. And it's just going to soften out the edge a bit. I think that that's a little extreme. So I'll reduce the opacity of that. This is what it looks without. This is what it looks like with. And you can do the same type of thing when you do your blush. You can do the same type of thing if you want to add more color to your cheeks. Here's the picture before, and here's the final result. I really hope you liked this tutorial, and if you did, please be sure to check out our other tutorials on design, video, and animation tips and tricks. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye!